This program is proudly sponsored by Nowicki Carbone, personal injury lawyers.
Good evening, welcome to Conflict of Interest. I'm Greg Barnes, he's Peter Farris. Peter, welcome back. I haven't seen you for a while.
No, I've been away. Had the lovely Sophie.
Sophie, yeah. It was a different dynamic when you were not here. We both observed that. But I think it's time, it's time to get the old team back in the chair.
Yeah,
tonight,
there's less sexual tension tonight.
Yeah. Tonight we're talking about asylum seekers. And of course recent events in Australia with a number of boats approaching Australia and political controversy being generated as a result, as we saw of course in 2001. Our guest tonight is Pamela Curr. She's a very well-known refugee advocate from the Asylum Seekers Resource Centre. But before we get to Pamela, and we will in the second segment, Peter, you know, asylum seekers in a sense, like all refugees, are part and parcel of a globalised world, aren't they?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, we even, it's this problem for the left. They're fighting globalism, but they want sort of free people movement. But it's quite extraordinary conflict of interest, you might say, there.
Well, I just on that, I mean, I agree with you about that.
Look at the freedom of movement within Europe. If you've got papers, right now, is the world going to end up like that?
Well, what's happening in Europe, of course, now is that you had a lot of people go across as economic migrants, Poles, Lithuanians, Slovenians, etc.
They're going back now.
Are now going back because the jobs have dried up, particularly in places like Ireland.
Yeah.
Ireland accepted an enormous number. So, you know, there's a bit of hypocrisy on the part of the developed world about this, because when we need labour, we're more than happy to go and get it from anywhere and everywhere.
Well, we got this, what is it? The
452 visas.
We got the Pacific Islanders.
Yeah, Pacific Islanders.
Labour,
yeah, that's right. You got the 452 visas, you can get people in a hurry.
Yeah.
And if you're an asylum seeker, often highly trained, a lot of asylum seekers are very, very highly trained and skillful people. You know, you've got to go through hell to get here. So there is a level of hypocrisy.
Bit careless with petrol and matches.
Well, we don't know. We don't know what the answer is there. We don't know what the answer is there. I knew we were going to disagree on something. I thought it was too good to be true.
Look, let's take it from the top. I think the first thing you've got to look at and say is, do you believe in nation states, or should we just be one big world where people can move freely around? If you believe in nation states, then you have to ask yourself, well, does a country, say like Australia, have the right, both the legal right and the moral right, to decide who comes in? If it does, most Australians, I think, would say we do have that right. Well, then, what are the tests? How do you decide? Okay, so we've got a very large official migration scheme with people all over the world making applications, living in terrible conditions in camps. We hear nothing about them. Nothing, no photographs of them or anything. The only people we hear about are the so-called illegal migrants, who are essentially the boat people. Now, what justification is there, given the scheme we've got, for them to jump the queue?
Well, I would argue there's no queue. There is no queue. I mean, the reality of life in a place like Islamabad, say, I mean, in Afghanistan is one of the key areas where refugees are now coming from, and increasingly so.
You've got no hope of getting to Australia.
You've got no hope of getting into Australia. The system doesn't work.
Well, maybe the answer is we should have a better system on the ground in Afghanistan.
I don't have any problem with that. We don't even have an embassy. You know, for Kevin Rudd to say, oh, you know, these people smugglers are evil, he's made their job easy. We don't even have an embassy in Kabul. He promised one and hasn't delivered on one. So, and the previous embassy worked out of an international hotel.
I've literally diplomats like that. I've got no problem with having...
They bombed the hotel.
I've got no problem with having Afghan immigrants.
Yeah.
None at all.
Yeah.
But I want them to be legal. And I want them to be people from Afghanistan who have been properly investigated and who can prove to come to this country.
Well...
But why should we be taking illegals?
Well, they're not illegal. It's not illegal to seek asylum. It is not illegal.
No,
there is no queue.
Illegal to be in Australia.
But they don't get, you know, they don't get to Australia because the Howard government went and excised all these parts.
Yeah, but the Howard government did it. But did the Rudd government change it back?
No, they didn't. Those excise zones remain the same.
Well, that's a disgrace, isn't it? I mean, that's just purest hypocrisy to say that. And the people who got burned in the boat fire are the best example. The ones that weren't burned basically went to Christmas Island.
Yep.
So they never got to Australia.
Yep.
But the ones who were burned, of course, had to be flown to Darwin.
Yep.
Brisbane
So they're now
Hospital.
in Australia.
So they're now in Australia.
They've got a better chance of getting asylum than those who go to Christmas
That's right,
Island.
because
I mean,
they've got
zone.
Well, that's just dishonest, isn't it?
Yeah, it is intellectually dishonest, but there's an enormous amount of intellectual dishonesty in the migration issue. And to go back to the point I made earlier, the West is very, very happy to soak up migration when things are going well economically. You have got to look at the US, the poorest border with Mexico.
Well, that's a whole other issue at the moment. It's swine fever.
But you've got people, people and whole sectors of the Californian economy and the Texan economy that can't exist.
But that's not us.
It can't exist.
That's not us. We don't have that.
No, but it is important because the other issue there is you've then got people saying, "Oh, America, we must protect our borders."
Yeah, but that's not us.
It's hypocrisy.
What I'm concerned about, I mean, if we've got good relations, pretty good relations with Indonesia, the Afghani government and the Iraqi government. Now, what's the problem with developing a protocol with them?
Well,
hang on, if their citizens land here on a boat, they're put on a plane, they're flown back. Well, what's the problem?
Well, the problem is this: you're often flying people back. Firstly, you've got to process their claims. You're often flying. Hang on, just a minute. No, just a minute.
Flying back the same day is my solution.
And so they get killed.
I don't care.
Let me just tell you. If
they don't want to get killed, don't come to Australia.
Let me tell you what happens in Afghanistan. The government has no jurisdiction outside Kabul. Absolutely none. The place is lawless. In Iraq, as we've seen over the weekend, far from safe. Sri Lanka.
It's not our job to look after these people.
No, but it is our job. It is our job to process claims of asylum.
No, it's not.
It's not our job.
We should fly these people back.
You don't
if they want to come
claims.
to Australia, they can make a claim through the United Nations.
Where?
Well, let the United Nations fix it up.
Where?
I don't care where.
It doesn't work. You just said earlier you agreed with me the system doesn't work.
Well, that's tough luck for them, but we shouldn't have to put up with them coming to... No, I haven't.
You've just gone from... You started off tonight by saying, well, you know...
I don't mind legal... Yeah. But if they come here unwelcome on boats, the best way to deter them is to fly them home the same day. Then the boats will stop.
Why didn't the Howard government do that? They were the nastiest. They were the nastiest on refugees.
Well, effectively did, and the boat stopped.
No, that's not right. What they did was they devised the Pacific Islands solution.
Yeah, and that stopped it, didn't it?
No, it didn't stop it. You still had. No, you still had. If you look at the number
there was hardly any.
If you look at the number of asylum seekers, they increased last year by 12% around the world. 12%.
I'm not talking about around the world, I'm talking about here.
In 2008, you had 4,750 people apply for asylum in Australia. In 2007, when the Howard government was in office, 3,980.
No, the boat people...
3,900. Not all the boats stopped.
It can't be disputed that the boat people have... The numbers have exploded in the last month.
They haven't exploded. What about 13 boats or something?
Well, we've got now
an explosion.
350, 360 people in the Christmas Island facility that they were going to shut down.
Well,
the Labor was going to shut down.
360 people. We've got a population here of 20 million.
Yeah,
you're worried about 360 people.
And then what's it going to go to?
Well, it'll be thousands. It's very hard to get here, Peter.
It's not hard. You just travel a small distance on a boat.
Why aren't we getting thousands as you get, for example, into Italy? We will.
Because in Italy they're coming direct from Africa.
Yeah, and they've got to go across. And they've got to go across the Mediterranean.
People in Africa who are going to an island,
and they get thousands.
Yeah, and we'll end up getting those too.
Well, I think that we'll come to this when we talk to Pamela. But I think one thing you've got to recognise is that Australia as a developed world country has a responsibility, along with the rest of the developed world, to ensure better security in developing world countries. If you want to stop people doing what humanity always does and try and seek a better life, that's what you've got to do.
So therefore we have to take these people.
I didn't say that. I said you've got to process their claims.
So if they want to come on a boat, we have to keep them, do we?
No, I said we process their claims.
Yeah, but
interestingly, Peter, about 90% of them, 90% of the people who went to Nauru and who went into the Pacific Island solution were processed as genuine refugees.
Yeah, but that's not the point. They're jumping the queue.
There is no queue.
There is a queue all around the world. Anyway, let's talk to Pamela about this.
Yeah, we will.
Because we have to have a break.
Okay.